West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
We should remind viewers who Cleta Mitchell is. This is her subpoena from the January 6th Select Committee. It says between early November 2020 and January 6, 2021, and thereafter, you actively promoted claims of election fraud on behalf of former President Trump and sought to convince state and federal officials to take steps to overturn the results. In particular, you participated in efforts to prevent, delay, or overturn the certification of the popular vote results in several states. You promoted false claims of election fraud to members of Congress and participated in a call in which President Trump pressured the Georgia Secretary of State to find enough votes to reverse his loss there. So that's who has partnered up with John, architect of the coup plot, Eastman, and they're doing what exactly?
So what Cleta and John Eastman are doing is actually slightly adjacent to the legal effort that's actually filing lawsuits in court right now. They've been, and as we've reported previously, Ms. Mitchell has referred to it as building a detective agency of these poll watchers, where they're going around the country holding meetings with grassroots activists in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, and trying to train these poll watchers to look for fraud and document everything. As John Eastman told a group in New Mexico in audio that we obtained that was first reported by Politico, document everything, and including even if a judge doesn't take your challenge, write that down, because what they're trying to do is build an avalanche of evidence, quote unquote evidence, I should say. This isn't necessarily evidence of any kind of wrongdoing. Often there's nothing wrong happening. But what they want is they want a bunch of evidence that they can go and give to some of these lawyers who are currently working or have already filed litigation to get something in the pipeline to try and challenge results. Now, that can be challenging ballots. That could be challenging processes. That could be trying to claim that the behavior of a certain election official was so egregious that, the election was therefore completely fraudulent and some drastic measures would need to be taken. So what you're seeing from Cleta Mitchell and John Eastman and some of these other kind of grassroots groups is an effort to bolster what is already a growing legal effort on the side of Republican lawyers.
Nick, what's so interesting about your reporting is I'll use the word from Ambassador Bill Taylor, it's through irregular channels. Election fraud is already illegal, and we have a criminal justice system to deal with the crimes of election fraud. Have Cleta Mitchell or John Eastman ever found any election fraud?
There's never been any case that's found widespread election fraud. There is no widespread election fraud in the United States. It's extremely isolated and rare when it does happen. You can look at the efforts in Texas, where Attorney General Paxton poured millions of dollars into an investigative fund and was able to come up with less than a dozen cases. In Florida, there was a big effort to hunt for election fraud. And again, that was well below 100 when, elections are decided by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of votes. So no, there has never been a case, nor has anyone currently claiming that there is such widespread election fraud that we need these, armies of poll watchers hunting for it. There's never been a case where it's come even close to determining the outcome of a statewide or federal presidential election.
And when they manufacture quote unquote evidence, have they ever convinced a judge to vote in their favor? Have they ever won anything in court on this issue?
Recently, no. And that's, I think, an important point when we look at the return of a lot of these lawyers and law firms who are active again, who were active in the 2020 election. If you look post-2020 election, the Trump campaign lost more than 60 of the lawsuits that it brought. Well, the Trump campaign and their allies. There was only one, and it was a very small, kind of insignificant to any number of ballots lawsuit, and it was in Pennsylvania following the 2020 election. So when we look now to the, more than 100 lawsuits that have been filed by both Democrats and Republicans, there isn't necessarily a track record of success here in challenging election results in court. It was Trump-appointed judges and it was Obama-appointed judges, Democrat and Republican, who universally rejected a lot of these legal efforts in 2020. So the judiciary held. But as it goes forward and new claims are brought and new lawyers join the fold or bigger firms, there's concerns from some Democratic experts who I've spoken to who are like, it held once, but the more you test it, the more a small part could break and that could start a flood.
Mary, in 2000, James Baker and former President Jimmy Carter looked at the same issue of voter fraud, and they didn't find any either. So fast forward to 2020, there's still no fraud in America. And when there is voter fraud, it's a crime and it's prosecuted. What is this?
This is just really an effort to manufacture evidence in order to bring massive numbers of lawsuits challenging the results of the election that hasn't even taken place yet, but for which they're trying to seed in advance some sort of justification for lawsuits that will tie up the results, delay the results, give time for partisans and former President Trump and those who may lose their elections, although I think many will win their elections, but
unfortunately,
may lose their elections to litigate. And it also, that then creates an environment during the litigation for those who are also election deniers, those who are supporting the candidates bringing the litigation, to take matters into their own hands, right? And we saw that in 2020. We saw that, there was a litigation track, but then there was a threats, harassment, intimidation, and political violence track. And, the same disinformation that fueled the attack on January 6th is the same disinformation fueling this effort, is the same disinformation that has the potential to fuel additional violence. And if I may add another point, listening to Cleta Mitchell, this is a lawyer, right? Lawyers have a code of professional responsibility. They are held to standards that when they bring cases in a court of law, they must be based on facts. They must not be frivolous. She does have complaints filed against her, bar complaints. There have been other lawyers who filed baseless lawsuits who have been sanctioned by courts. Mm-hmm. And of course, Rudy Giuliani has been disbarred. I mean, it is a disgrace to lawyers, and I am a lawyer, to see this type of concerted effort. This is not conservatives, as Cleta Mitchell said. This is conspirators. And it's a threat to democracy. It's also just, to see lawyers doing this is the very worst I can imagine for lawyers to be partaking in.
Well, and I think we've talked about, our politics are broken, so you can't rely on them to be thrown out, right? These are who Republicans picked in the primary contest. So the reason they're in the general is they won contests. Can the profession do more to sanction them?
So, with respect to lawyers, there certainly are, a lawyer, if you're going to practice law, you have to be a member of a bar in at least one state. And those bars have their own committees on grievances and professional responsibility. And so they can be disbarred for cause. And certainly bringing baseless lawsuits is a reason for an inquiry. There are judges in the cases that they bring who can hold them in contempt, ask them to show cause why they shouldn't be held in contempt for bringing frivolous lawsuits. And so, there's those kinds of things for lawyers. For the candidates, though, for the people who are running, who it's not dependent on keeping their bar membership, we usually look to elections as the means of taking care of this. The problem is if we can't trust our elections, and I'm not saying we can't, our elections are secure. There's no measurable fraud in this country, and there hasn't been for decades and decades. But if people don't believe they're secure, if people are feeling intimidated from going to the polls, because remember, as this is going on, this poll worker recruitment is not just about ginning up baseless claims on which they can bring a lawsuit. It's also to intimidate people, to make people think they're being watched, they're being doing something wrong.
They are being watched. They're being filmed.
They are being watched, right? And that they're doing something wrong, and that there'll be a legal consequence to that, right? So all of this is an effort to suppress the vote in the hope that they'll have a better showing, and then if they don't, to have this false narrative, this false bed of facts that can then be used to litigate.
And the delay is being used in the way you describe, in very much the same way Trump envisioned it, that in the delay, the violence is the tool for not certifying Joe Biden's win. If it's tied to a threat to our homeland security, should there be a more aggressive effort to call out, sort of name and shame, the law firms doing this legal work that has a direct line to destabilizing?
Well, I do think that more pressure on the lawyers is warranted. I mean, there have been some sort of, some of the worst, Cleta Mitchell, Jenna Ellis, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, they're in the news every day. But there's a whole army out there, as the New York Times reporting indicated. And a lot of these are kind of flying under the radar. And, now I'm sure there's a line, right? There's the most extreme cases, and there's others that have a factual basis. And I'm not suggesting that all lawyers are evil. I am one, but there's a standard, and we live by that standard, and it's important for the rule of law. It's important for our justice system, and for the way we resolve disputes through litigation is we do it through litigation, not through violence, and we do it through litigation based on facts. And we can have reasonable disagreements about the law. We can have reasonable disagreements about what the facts show, but we don't make up facts, and so that should be called out.
It is Friday, the 4th of November of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, indeed. And you know what we should also be this weekend? Yeah, get out the vote, Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Hey, go out and vote if you haven't already. And get a couple of friends and get them to get a few friends and get them all out to vote. I don't care if there's Nazis standing nearby with their automatic rifles. Go and vote, okay? Don't worry, you're protected. Sorta. But you can't let the terrorists win, all right? If you don't show up, the terrorists win. And I'm not being hyperbolic right now. I am being absolutely serious. Because, now would be a good time for all of us to remember Sinclair Lewis's book, It Can't Happen Here. Maybe even Frank Zappa's song, It Can't Happen Here. The whole thing's cool. It can't happen here. Do-doop-be-doo. And brown shoes don't make it, if you know what I mean. So it can happen here. And the dystopian reasons that Sinclair Lewis laid out in his book, which were, I have to say, quite over the top, even for the times. Seems rather pedestrian now. Oh, everybody does that. Religious tests for office? Oh, yeah. What? If we don't have religious tests in office, you're violating the Constitution. It says right there. Where does it say? It actually says in the Constitution, no religious tests, but somehow they forget that. It also says a well-regulated militia, and I don't think Oath Keepers, 3%ers, anybody who's an ex or current law enforcement or military type who knows how to drill, if they're out of the purview of the National Guard etc. They are not a well-regulated militia. They're an unregulated militia. Or, as we like to call them, vigilantes, insurgents, seditious traitors. Okay. But Antifa will be blamed because for some reason, being anti-fascist is a bad thing, but being fascist is good. I love how like you can just go ahead and use the term socialism and everybody will go, well, then in that case, we got to join Hitler. Interstate highway system, socialism, we got to join Hitler. Not knowing that he built the Autobahn, which was like an interstate highway system. Socialism, apparently. Well, here in America, it was a little different when we built the highway system. And I will say that Eisenhower was accused of being a socialist by the Birchers and of the day. Okay. Pre-Birchers, maybe. Let's give him that. But regardless, there was a whole McCarthyite thing going on that said that you believe that Eisenhower had a bunch of commies in the State Department. And look at all of this terrible stuff. We got to root it out. Try that with trying to root out the Nazis and the fascists, the insurgents, election deniers. If you're an election denier, you deny that you believe in our elections. So therefore, I don't think you should be allowed to run. Oh, well, we don't believe in the rules of these elections, but we're going to run for them. Well, no, you're not. Because then what they do is they bring their armed goose-stepping goons to intimidate people. Where's our National Guard, meaning the United States? And, well, there you go. You need a state governor to mobilize them, apparently. But I think that the president has some say in this as well. I think the DOJ has some say in this as well. Send a bunch of SWAT team U.S. Marshals down there. Wherever. I know they're overtaxed. They don't have enough people to monitor all the security cameras that they have up for our electeds already. And I got to tell you, it's not Antifa flooding the zone with all this violence, though if you, I don't know, look at Sinclair Broadcasting, maybe you would believe it is their fault. Our cities were burning. Our cities burned to the ground. And you show them the facts. And then try to get them to do a little bit of work like, hey, how about showing me the appropriations that were doled out to rebuild all of these devastated, burned-to-the-ground cities? Where is it? There was no cities burned to the ground. You saw a blown-up video picture of a literal dumpster fire in front of a courthouse. The courthouse wasn't on fire, the dumpster was. But the caption said, Portland on fire. And it had a picture of a dumpster fire in front of the courthouse. A literal dumpster fire. Of course, they didn't show when the Proud Boys and the Portland police rioted together to crack a few heads of old people who were protesting, well, you know, knees on necks of black people. If there's anything worse, is a bunch of white people protecting all of those black people and their colored friends. We have a story coming up about synagogues. Credible threats against synagogues. I don't think it's Antifa attacking synagogues. It's not Antifa burning down black churches. Okay? It's not Antifa calling the cops on a DoorDash delivery driver bringing groceries to old people in an apartment complex. Oh, you're a thief. Why do you have all those groceries? Why do you have all those groceries in the trunk of your car? You're a thief. I'm delivering to old people. They ordered them. Prove it. Prove it. It's not Antifa doing that. Okay? Not too many Antifa Karens running around. Anti-fascism is apparently so gauche now. Oh, you're a loser. Elon Musk is getting sued. Looks like maybe a class action suit filed by Lisa Bloom for violating California law on these mass layoffs. You got to give people 60 days in the state of California. And I got to tell you, most labor law in most states have the same law. 30 to 60 days notice. But Elon Musk is his Ayn Rand libertarian. That's right. You're a cog in my machine. I can do whatever I want with you, and I can replace you when I want. Another cog for another cog. Yeah. And then I have to put up with Morning Joe and others saying, he's invented things. He's so smart. He hasn't invented one thing in his life. Please. He inherited an apartheid blood emerald fortune and then parlayed that into buying companies, and that's how he acquired his wealth. He bought SpaceX and all of its engineers. He bought Tesla and already proven technology and all of their engineers. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, is he a genius in marketing? I don't know. I love how the Tesla was pretty much marketed for Volvo driving liberals. So let's figure a way of offending that market. So he wants to lay off 50% of Twitter right before Election Day. Got rid of all of the disinformation controls that were in place and the people running them. Locked them all up. Then goes out and starts advancing talking points by Vladimir Putin. I would think that in a similar circumstance, if this was Antifa, they would be held for consorting with a hostile foreign power. Why isn't this guy not scrutinized in the same fashion? Because we rely on his SpaceX rockets to supply our people on a space station? Is that what it is? We have a thing called NASA, which is already partnered with private interests. Almost like originalism. Why don't we try it? Yikes. Okay. All right. Well, we will continue to be on Twitter as a bulwark against these dark forces as long as we can. We only have so much control over ourselves. $8 to verify who you want to be. Not a verification system of who you actually are, but who you want to be. $8. I want to be an expert on science and immunizations, says the anti-vaxxer. All right. Well, one way to destroy a civilization, let's just say a nation state, is to instill confusion from within. I gotta say, it's not Antifa doing this. Weird, huh? I wish we could do something about it. All right, well, we are. Let's flood the zone with votes. They can only mess around on the margins. I know they've gamed the system through gerrymandering, and they have the Electoral College, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all the voter suppression, and all the votes being thrown out. But it just means we got to vote harder, meaning that more people need to vote. All right. Did I get my sermonizing out of my system? Probably not. But we do have that curated show that we always have 5 days a week in the mornings here on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Netroots Radio. Okay, well, at the top, Trump's Trump's 2020 election-denying lawyers have returned to assist in midterm election challenges, just like the now counting over 100 cases and counting that they've lost so far. On the rest of the menu, the FBI warned of that broad threat to synagogues in New Jersey that I referenced earlier. A top Milwaukee elections official has been fired after sending falsely obtained military absentee ballots to the home of an election-denying Republican state lawmaker. And Oprah delivered a November surprise by endorsing Fetterman over Oz. So stop blaming her for everything. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Bank of England rolled out its biggest interest rate increase in 3 decades. Is that Biden inflation over there? I don't know. Maybe it's Brexit inflation. And tens of thousands of Spanish union workers held a protest march in Madrid to demand higher wages to offset the soaring cost of living. You know, price gouging that they call inflation will do that to you. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who does so much more than just monitor the chat room. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that really helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this powerhouse of resistance against those dark forces arrayed against representative democracy here in the United States of America and around the world. So thank you for your generosity. We need it. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a lot more than just the Twitter platform. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. That's where the real reportage is, and the full articles too. So sometimes I'm not able to finish the full article, and then we abbreviate or, I don't know, ad-lib a little bit, don't we? But the full articles can be found at the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's, and you can find that by following me on Twitter. So there. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And I guess I should also mention that the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library over these past 11 plus years can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay. Hey, Paul Pelosi got sent home. That's good news, even though he's going to have a long recovery from having his head bashed in. And the GOP continues. And when I say GOP, it seems like not very many of them, or any of them, will put the cruel goose-steppers in their place. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene still mocking Paul Pelosi, blaming him for the attack. These ghouls, you know, I'll say this. I mentioned it on social media, but there were no There were no liberals out there mocking George Wallace when he was put into a wheelchair for the rest of his life. No one said he had it coming. I mean, maybe he did if you look at karma. But nobody went out there and said, oh, this is the way that American politics should be. Every liberal that I knew and respected came out, as you would normally do, and decried that political violence. It has no place in America and American democracy. No matter how much of a bigot and a racist George Wallace was, we don't run our politics at the point of a gun. We blamed Russia and China for that kind of behavior, and now I guess, if you want to say Russia and China have won, yeah. What group of people were most susceptible to turning against their country and trying to overthrow it? It was not Antifa. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Ryan Kriska and Michael Balsamo. The FBI said yesterday, Thursday, that it had received credible information about a broad threat to synagogues in New Jersey, a warning that prompted some municipalities to send extra police officers to guard houses of worship. The nature of the threat was vague. The FBI's Newark office released a statement urging synagogues to, quote, take all security precautions to protect your community and facility, end quote, but would not say anything about who made the threat or why, and we can only imagine who might be making those threats. The alert was posted after officials discovered an online threat directed broadly at synagogues in New Jersey, a law enforcement official said. The posting did not target any specific synagogue by name. The official could not discuss details of the investigation publicly and spoke to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity. Messages left to the FBI's Newark office were not returned, and public warnings about nonspecific threats against Jewish institutions made by a variety of groups, including Christian supremacists and Islamist supremacists, are not unusual in the New York City metropolitan area, and many turn out to be false alarms, but the area has also seen deadly attacks. In Jersey City, Mayor Stephen Fulop said police could be posted at the city's 7 synagogues, or would be posted, and foot patrols would be added in the broader Jewish community. In 2019, 2 assailants, motivated by anti-Jewish hate, killed a police officer, then drove to a kosher market in Jersey City and killed 3 more people before being slain in a gun battle with police. Police officers armed with rifles guarded a synagogue 1 city over in Hoboken, where the public safety director also announced increased patrols in Jewish communities. 5 years ago, 2 New Jersey men were sentenced to 35 years in prison after being convicted for a series of attacks in 2012 that included the fire bombings of 2 synagogues. They also threw a Molotov cocktail into the home of a rabbi as he slept with his wife and children. And in 2019, a man stabbed 5 people at a Hanukkah celebration at a rabbi's home in an Orthodox Jewish community north of New York City, fatally wounding 1 person. Harm Ben Wiesen of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A top Milwaukee elections official has been fired after sending falsely obtained military absentee ballots to the home of a Republican state lawmaker who has been an outspoken critic of how the 2020 election was administered, which is a pretty long way of saying that the guy is an election denier. Kimberly Zapata, deputy director of the Milwaukee Election Commission, requested military ballots for fictitious voters from clerks in nearby municipalities using the state's My Vote Wisconsin website. Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson said just days before the midterm election, this has every appearance of being an egregious, blatant violation of trust, and this matter is now in the hands of law enforcement, said the mayor. As part of her job, Zapata oversaw the counting of absentee ballots in Milwaukee. The mayor said the city is investigating whether she might have committed any other offenses. The ballots were sent to the home of Republican State Representative Janelle Brandgen, who chairs the Assembly Elections Committee and has voiced support for overturning the results of the 2020 presidential election in the state and promoted conspiracy theories about the same. Earlier this week, Brandgen's office said she had received 3 ballots for military voters that she believed to be fictitious. Brandgen said then she thought someone was trying to show how easy it is to get military ballots in Wisconsin. The announcement comes 5 days ahead of Election Day in a cycle where officials are increasingly concerned about threats from within their own organizations. In battleground states such as Wisconsin, election officials are seeing record partisan poll worker nominations that could put skeptics on the front lines of the voting process. Zapata's motive for allegedly obtaining and sending the ballots was not immediately clear. Wink, wink. She did not immediately respond to messages left yesterday, Thursday, at phone numbers believed to be hers. And Michael Mieseltman, an attorney for Zapata, declined to comment. Zapata's alleged actions echo those of a Racine man who requested and received absentee ballots in the names of lawmakers and local officials in July. That man, Harry Waite, said he wanted to expose vulnerabilities in the state's election system. He has been charged with 2 misdemeanor counts of election fraud and 2 felony counts of identity theft, charges that could land him in prison for up to 13 years. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. TV icon Oprah Winfrey endorsed Democrat John Fetterman in Pennsylvania's hotly contested Senate race and rejected Republican Dr. Mehmet Oz, whom she helped launch to stardom nearly 2 decades ago when she brought him on to her popular daytime talk show as a regular guest. Until now, Winfrey had said she would leave the election to Pennsylvanians, but she changed that position in an online discussion on voting in next Tuesday's election. I said it was up to the citizens of Pennsylvania, and of course. But I will tell you all this. If I lived in Pennsylvania, I would have already cast my vote for John Fetterman for many reasons, Winfrey said, before going on to urge listeners to vote for Democrats running for governor and Senate in various states. The Pennsylvania seat has for months been seen as the most likely pickup opportunity for Democrats in the evenly divided Senate. Polls show a close race between Fetterman and Oz, a celebrity heart surgeon who is endorsed by former President Donald Trump. We should remind folks that he pretty much was censored by the American Medical Association and lost his ability to perform any surgeries or any kind of heart consultations for several years. In a sign of how high the stakes are, Trump will return to Pennsylvania tomorrow, Saturday, to campaign for Oz, while President Joe Biden and former President Barack Obama will campaign for Fetterman that same day. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, when you can't make good movies about good people. Once again, the DC Cinematic Universe hates their heroes. They hate their be good, don't kill moral stances and wish they were more savage. That's why the real villains in their movies are their heroes, like Superman and Justice League. At Marvel, with great power comes great responsibility. At the DCU, with great individual power comes an oppressive threat to the freedoms of the weak and to the great power of the government. That's why their better movies are about their antiheroes and their best are about their villains. And so Batman gets more broken and dysfunctional, with the Riddler being his last movie's real star, and Suicide Squad, and structurally racist and anti-Semitic, let's turn a mass murderer into a messiah figure Joker. So, Black Adam also suffers from this hero is stupid/dangerous bias, as well as the same problem as Harley Quinn and Birds of Prey. If you want a Justice Society movie, do that. If you want a Black Adam movie, the same. But here they feel like different tones forced together, and I get they're supposed to present that moral stance conflict between hero and kill-friendly liberating champion, but since the DCU creators can't write the hero's viewpoint as anything but stupid, they treat the conflict superficially at best. Add on to that, the kid who's the back-talking, skateboarding, fanboy, Scrappy-Doo eventual hostage heart of the film, his fat, funny uncle, and his hot mom who's a university professor and concerned for her people except, oh psych, all I care about is my son, and you're like, oh, it's also that kind of movie. Also, it's the kind written, 2 out of 3, by the dominant social group, so that Black Adam's rage from having been enslaved under a dictatorial, exploitative regime and his guilt from his passive hopelessness leading up to his family's execution make his defining character flaw, rather than being a natural sympathy-inducing reaction to that trauma. Ugh. At least there's the first Wonder Woman, and every Black Adam fight scene with The Rock is beautiful. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Although we haven't even gotten through this year's midterm congressional elections, it's still not too early to start examining some of the characters who hope you will make them president in 2024. I know you don't want to, but we must. That's because corporate elites have already chosen their favorites, and they intend to use massive sums of money, lies, more money, PR slick'em, and even more money to slide their toady into the Oval Office, hoping you don't discover until it's too late that their chosen one really is a toad. Take Ron DeSantis. The GOP's far-right, power-hungry, narcissistic Florida governor promises to be the next Donald Trump, only more effective and not as nice. For example, his favorite gubernatorial hobby is the Orwellian practice of monitoring and censoring people's speech and thoughts, culling out ideas he deems objectionable. Don't say gay is his most infamous dictate to the state's teachers, but he has also outlawed any teachings that might, quote, denigrate the Founding Fathers. Nor will he tolerate the study of institutional racism in America. Indeed, he has even mandated that social studies textbooks, get this, must not include concepts of social justice. Ron adamantly opposes what right-wingers call a woke society. He wants one that's asleep, sound asleep. He recently rallied his right-wing cadre to ban some math textbooks. Yes, math. They screeched that some real-life topics like wage disparities are being used to make math problems relevant to today's students. So it was Fahrenheit 451 for those books. Thus far, DeSantis' censorship binge has nixed 42 math books for, quote, incorporating prohibited topics. This is Jim Hightower saying, did I mention that DeSantis is also forming his own gubernatorial military force? A state army he can deploy in emergencies. What's an emergency? He says he'll decide. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Got milk? If you lived in Neillsville, Wisconsin, the answer might have been no. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1933. Wisconsin was known as the dairy state. In the 1930s, it was the largest producer of milk in the country. The price of milk fell during the Great Depression, and farmers received a smaller percentage of the proceeds. A cooperative group of dairy farmers objected to the low prices set by the larger dairy plants. Farmers who produced milk for bottling remained solvent. However, farmers who produced milk for cheese, butter, and other dairy products were driven into poverty. Some dairy farmers banded together and decided not to sell milk unless a previously agreed upon price was met. They were vastly outnumbered, as many farmers sold at the reduced price. the strikers resorted to roadblocks to prevent delivery to the manufacturers. If a truck driver refused to turn back, the strikers forcibly dumped the milk at the roadside. Sometimes the strikers tainted the delivered milk with kerosene or oil. They also targeted creameries, causing damage to 7 during the strike. The state tried to break up the roadblocks or use convoys to escort trucks. Non-striking farmers attempted to deliver milk via railways, but some rail lines were also blocked by strikers. The October to November strike was the third in a series of milk strikes in Wisconsin. Thousands of gallons of milk were dumped. A 60-year-old farmer was killed at a picket line in one Wisconsin town. In all, farmers lost $10 million during the strike.
No milk today, it seems a common sight, but people passing by don't know the reason why. How could they know just what this message means? The end of my hopes, the end of all my dreams.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Behind the door, where my love reigned.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of somewhere around the mid-50s, generally cloudy throughout the day with winds out of the south-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. It does not have a forecast of rain for the day, though it is raining as we speak. But though tonight, rain is likely, and they say a potential for heavy rainfall, lows in the low 50s, winds out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then, of course, they say Weather Underground, being they, say the chance of rain is 100%, with rainfall around 3/4 of an inch. And then cloudy with occasional rain tomorrow, mainly in the morning, with highs in the mid-50s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And that rain will bring with it about 1/4 of an inch. And then we have even more rain through the weekend. And as I stated, we still have a forecast of a snowy rain mix on Monday and Tuesday. We'll see how that fares. Pollen is rated as none. And the air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is good at 30 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.25 inches. Visibility is up to 6 miles. And relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 54 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 54 degrees and mostly cloudy. Rome is 66 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 47 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 55 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 55 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York, New York is 61 degrees Fahrenheit with fog. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Danica Kurka of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Bank of England rolled out its biggest interest rate increase in 3 decades, saying the move was needed to beat back stubbornly high inflation that is eroding living standards and is likely to trigger a prolonged recession. The central bank boosted its key rate by 0.75% to 3%. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine has driven up food and energy costs, pushing consumer price inflation to 40-year highs. The aggressive step was expected after a more cautious half-point increase 6 weeks ago and matches the recent moves by the U.S. Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank. While higher interest rates will boost the cost of mortgages and credit card debt for already stretched consumers, the move was necessary to control inflation that has left people with less money to spend and is slowing economic activity, Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said. The bank, whose task got tougher after former Prime Minister Liz Truss's economic plans roiled financial markets, forecasts that the British economy is likely to contract for 2 years through June of 2024. That would be the longest recession since at least 1955. The rate increase is the Bank of England's 8th in a row and the biggest since a short-lived 1992 hike. It comes a day after the U.S. Fed announced a 4th consecutive 3/4-point jump. Central banks worldwide have struggled to contain inflation, which is a nice way of calling it price gouging, after initially believing price increases were fueled by international factors beyond their control. Their response has intensified in recent months as it became clear that inflation was already becoming embedded in the economy, feeding through into higher borrowing costs and demands for higher wages.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. Thousands of Spanish workers held a protest march yesterday, Thursday, in Madrid, called by Spain's major labor unions to demand higher wages to offset the soaring cost of living. Members of the UGT and the CCOO unions marched through the Spanish capital under the slogan, "Salary or Conflict." The unions want Spain's government and business leaders to agree to increase the minimum salary above the current $987 a month in response to rampant inflation that has only recently started to slow. Today, unfortunately, due to the situation we are facing, salaries do not cover our basic necessities, said Carmen Troina, a marcher, age 55. Like other countries, Spain has seen price increases driven by rising fuel costs that Russia's invasion of Ukraine exacerbated by causing supply reductions. Higher prices for food in Europe has sparked protests across the continent. Interest rate hikes used by monetary authorities to reduce inflation have also driven up mortgage payments. The Catholic charity organization Caritas issued a report that concluded that 3 out of 10 Spanish families don't have the financial resources to maintain dignified living conditions. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And get out there and vote. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pas fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.